Hi and welcome back. In this video we're going to start talking about the CSS Box model. And this is a concept inside of CSS that you really want to understand. It's going to be something that you're going to be using constantly when you're building web pages. And if you've downloaded the handout for this series, the CSS handout I should say, you're going to find a page in that handout that's labeled the CSS Box model. And I want to use this illustration here to describe basically what the box model is. And there are three different concepts that I want to talk about right now: padding, border, and margin. Now you can see here in my illustration we have an object, or that might be more appropriately called an element. This could be an image, it could be a paragraph of text or a heading, it could be a div, a table, anything at all on your page. And the blue border represents the outer edge of that object. And if it's helpful to think of this as an image right now, just think of this as an image, not as a text element or something else. Now, immediately outside of the edge of the object, you have your padding area. The padding area separates the edge of the object from the border that is around the object. Now, sometimes the border is visible, sometimes it's not visible. But the padding area is always going to separate, again, the edge of your object from that border edge. And then after the border, you have your margin area. And the margin area separates the border that's around the object from the other objects that are around it. So again, going back to our illustration here, you can think about this again as two different images. The margin area is what separates one image from another image. In addition, or the edge of the border around the image from the other images that are around it. Two other CSS box model properties that we'll be talking about a little bit later are width and height. So let's go ahead, now that we've got a basic understanding of where these different elements are and what they mean, let's go back into our sample project here. And again, I'm in my test site. And I'm going to come into styles.css, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything from that page. And that way our HTML page doesn't have any styling on it at all. And actually, what I just said there isn't exactly correct. It's not that this page doesn't have any formatting applied to it, it's that we haven't applied any formatting to the page. You can see here my headings are still a particular font and size, and you can also see that there's a certain amount of space in between the different elements that are on the page. You know, for example, there's a little bit of space in between these two images. There's space in between the paragraphs and the headings. And this spacing or this formatting is applied to your page by whatever browser you're looking at the page in. Now in this case we're looking at it in Dreamweaver's design view, but this is also true if we were to look at this in a regular browser. And you can see again there's some spacing that's been placed in here, as well as some font formatting. Now the problem that this brings up is that different browsers apply a different amount of spacing to the different elements. So the spacing that, let's say, Google Chrome applies is going to be different than the spacing that Internet Explorer places around the different elements. And that creates a problem for us right out of the box that we need to correct before we can really control the way our different elements are positioned and spaced. And the way you wipe out the default browser settings for your page is by including what's called a reset inside of your CSS file as the first item. Now, there are a variety of different resets that are out there. I have one that I include in my framework with my projects. If you go to Google and just search for CSS reset, you'll see lots of different articles out there that explain what resets are and give you different examples of how you can create them. But for right now, just know that a reset is going to wipe out any padding, border, or margin that's placed on a page by the browser. So I'm going to come into my style sheet right here, and I'm going to create a simple reset. And I'm going to do that by typing an asterisk and then an opening curly brace. Now, in CSS, the asterisk is a wildcard. And if you've worked with other programs like Microsoft Access or Microsoft Excel, or if you've done a lot of work with search engines, you know how the asterisk can be used as a wildcard to represent different elements. So what this is basically saying is match all the elements on the page. Match divs, images, headings, paragraphs, select everything. And then we have our normal curly brace that opens our style. And I'm going to go ahead and type in the CSS property padding and give it a value of 0. I'm going to do the same thing for margin. I'm going to type in the property name margin and then assign the value of 0 to it. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and apply the value 0 to border. And what that's going to do is it's going to remove all the padding, margin, and borders from your entire page. And then later down in your style sheet, you can set up exactly what you want what you want the values for those properties to be. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and look at our page, and you can see all of the spacing is gone. Some people go a little bit further than setting up just the padding, margin, and border and set up some default font styling. A lot of people will also put in font size and then just a default font size and font weight and set that for normal. And what that does is it removes all the default font sizing and weight that a browser might apply to a page. And again, this is just a very simple example of a CSS reset, but it does the job. It doesn't do everything that you can do with a reset, but it gets the basics that we need done. So again, you can see here we've wiped out all of the spacing as well as all the font sizing on this page. So let's go ahead now and let's think about these images that are on the page. Now, first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create a tag selector for IMG. And I'm going to go ahead and say that the padding around my objects needs to be 20 pixels. And we'll go ahead and close that style off. And now I'm going to go ahead and look, and you can see I've got 20 pixels of padding all the way around each one of my images that are on the page. Now let's go ahead and apply a border around our images. I'm going to go ahead and type in border 1 pixel. That's going to be the width of the border. Then I'm going to go ahead and type in the color, which I'm going to set as being red, just so it stands out for us. And then I want the border to be solid. not dashed or dotted. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now, again, when we're looking at our object, we can see the amount of padding that's been placed in there, as well as the border that's been placed around the object. But you can see, here's a paragraph and here's another paragraph. There's not really any space in between that border and these elements that are outside of that object. And again, if we go back to our box model, you can see this coming to life, where we've got the edge of the object, our padding area and our border, and then our margin area, which separates one object from another. And again, here everything is pushed right up against each other. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and type in margin 20 pixels and save that. And now let's go ahead and take a look at this, and we can again see now there's not only 20 pixels of padding around our objects, there's also 20 pixels of margin space around our image objects that are here. Another word specific to Dreamweaver, you're going to see these dotted lines right up here. The dotted lines indicate the edge of the different divs that are on your page. So they represent the outer edge of these elements. Oops. These lines, or these dashed lines, are just showing up as guides for you. They don't actually appear on the page. And if I go ahead and open this up in Google Chrome, you can see I've got borders around my images, but I don't have those dashed borders. Those are just there to sort of give you a guide. If you go to the View menu inside of Dreamweaver, you're going to see an option here for visual aids, and you can see the different elements that are on here. For example, I have CSS layout outline selected, as well as the CSS layout box model selected. I can also apply a background color to my different layout elements from here. And this can be really useful in that it's going to assign a different color to each div. So you can see where one div begins and where another one ends on the page. And you can see I can select that there. I can click on that there, and it's going to select that entire div. Dreamweaver is also going to bring up a little tooltip, and when I hover over the border, you can see what's been applied to those different elements. But for right now, and again, this is just a visual aid inside of Dreamweaver. Later on, when we really start building a page, these layout backgrounds are going to become very valuable to us. But for right now, you can either leave them off or on. And again, you can control that from right here. I can turn off that. I can even go into visual aids and say hide all, and you'll see everything disappears. But I don't think that that's going to be what's going to serve us best right now, so I'm going to unselect that right now. So that's the difference between padding and margin specifically. Remember that padding is sort of on the inside of an element, whereas margin is on the outside of an element. Let's see that one more done in one more fashion. Let's look at our footer down here at the bottom. And you can see there's no spacing around the area that says this is the footer area. But I'm going to go ahead and go back into my style sheet here. And I'm going to go ahead and create an ID style. And you'll remember an ID style always begins with a number sign and then the ID name for that particular element, which in this case is the footer div down here. And if I go into code view, you can see I've set the ID up as footer. And this time I'm going to go ahead and say the padding is again going to be 20 pixels. I'm not going to put any margin on, border on, but I am going to put 20 pixels of margin on the footer. And I'm going to save that. Let's go back into our page and preview this in design view right now. And you can see here, Dreamweaver again is bringing up some visual aids for you, where you can see the padding area, then the edge of the div, and then the margin area outside of the div. So I have 20 pixels of padding, and then the edge of the div, and then 20 pixels of margin, and then the edge of the object that it is up against. So you can apply these different elements wherever you want, or onto whatever you want. And again, in the case of divs specifically, when I click on the edge of the div, you're going to see that it's going to highlight what's margin and what's padding. You can see the sort of the thicker crosshatch out here indicates the margin area, and the thinner crosshatch on the inside of the object represents the padding. And in some cases, it doesn't matter whether you use padding or margin, but in other cases, it really does. And again, when we're actually building our project website, you'll see when it matters and when it doesn't matter. We can also apply padding and margin to our headers. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to apply a certain amount of padding on the top and the bottom of my headings. Now, in this case, I've got several different levels of headings here. I've got an H1 here, an H3, another H1, an H2, and an H4. So I actually have 4 different levels of headings on this page. Now, let's say you wanted to apply 10 pixels of spacing below your heading and 20 pixels of spacing above your heading. The way you would write that is simply H1 and then padding 0, 0, 10 pixels and 0. And then margin 0, 0, 20 pixels on, and then 0. And then close that off. So let's look at what this actually means here. If you declare padding or margin and you just have one value, that value is going to be placed all the way around the object. And you can see that with our images and our footing and our footer. There's padding all the way around the object. If you want to specify a different amount of padding or margin, top, right, bottom, and left, you enter in 4 values after the keyword padding. And again, the order is important here. The first value is top, the second value is right, the third value is bottom, and the fourth value is left. And just think, we're going around the element clockwise. Top, right, bottom, and then left. So again, I've done that for my H1s, and you can see here I now have some padding below that H1 element that's right there. If I was to come in here and apply 20 pixels of padding and margin to my H1, now you can see I've got 20 pixels of padding above that H1 element and 10 pixels below that H1 element. And there still is none on the left or the right. And in this case, we couldn't see if we placed any padding or margin on the right. But if I was to come in here and let's say put 100 pixels of padding in the left-hand position and save that, you can see that element has been bumped over 100 pixels. And again, I want you to notice that that padding is on the inside of this element, not on the outside of the element. And again, don't worry about why that's important right now, but just know that you can apply padding on the inside or the outside, and the same thing goes for margin. So we've now gone ahead and set all of that up for our H1s. Now, I could do this same thing, and I might copy and paste it in and apply this to my H2s, my H3s, and I could put different values in for each one of these. And we had some H4s, so I'm going to go ahead and put in H4 there. So that would create styles for the margin and padding for each one of these different elements. And you can see the way our secondary headings, our third level headings, and our fourth level headings have that positioned. But in this case, I want the same amount of padding and margin on all four of these different elements. So it's not necessary to go ahead and create four different styles. What you can do is you can create what's called a grouped selector. And if I do H1 and save it and come back in here, you can see that our other headings, like our third level heading and our secondary heading, have no padding or margin on them. But if I come back into my selector and type a comma and then H2, another comma and then H3, and then a final comma and H4, and I'm just going to add some tabs in there so this is a little bit more readable. I've now said select all four of these elements and apply this style to them, or these properties and values to them. And now when I look, we can see my H1s, my H3s, my secondary headings, my H2s, my third level headings, and my fourth level headings are on the page. So that can make writing your CSS a lot faster, and it can also make things a lot more consistent. If you want to make sure that there's always the same amount of padding and margin around all of your different heading levels, well, this is going to do that, because if I make one change over here, it's going to apply to all four of these different items. Whereas if I have separate styles, I would have to make four different changes. So again, these group selectors really help with consistency. And I'm going to go ahead and take that left hand spacing off here, and you can see again what that's going to do. So we've seen when we have one value after padding or margin, it's going to place that amount of space around the entire object, top, bottom, left, and right. If we have four values after padding or margin, it's going to go ahead and place that amount of padding top, right, bottom, and then left. So we can specify exactly how much padding we have. If I just have two values, like this, This is going to apply 20 pixels top and bottom and 0 pixels left and right. And I'll save that. And again, you can see the way that's appearing on our page. So remember, there is a difference between having one value, two values, three values also has a meaning, but that's not used as often. If you have three values, it would allow you to set the top and the bottom as a single parameter, and then the second value would be the right hand spacing, and the third value would be the left hand spacing. Again, that's not used too terribly often. You can also directly declare how much spacing that you have. For example, let's say I wanted to put some padding on my paragraphs. I could go ahead and say padding bottom. Whoops. Almost forgot that there. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do a p tag and then a curly brace, and then I can say padding bottom at 20 pixels. And this is going to apply 20 pixels just to the bottom of my p tag. And you can see, actually you can't really see right now on that, but we'll see more examples of the way we can apply padding and margin as we go along. Now, we've done quite a bit here with padding and margin. We haven't done anything with borders since we worked on our image here. Let's go ahead and put a border around our headings. I'm going to go ahead and say border 1 pixel, and again I'm going to specify a color here. I'm going to go ahead and make it this light blue, and I'm going to go ahead and say that it should be a solid border, and I'll save that. And you can now see each one of my headings has a blue border around it. If I just want to specify the border to go on the top or the bottom or the left or the right of the item, I can do that by saying something like border dash bottom, or border dash top, or border dash left, or border dash right. And now what this is going to do is it's just going to place that light blue border on the bottom of my different heading elements. And you can see that there. And actually I'm going to preview this in a browser, and that'll make it a little bit more obvious there. So lots of different things that you can do with the borders and spacing on your, I should say on the borders, padding, and margin on your item. The next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to learn about some of the CSS properties for list items and links that are on your page, and talk a little bit about the way we set up navigation elements with CSS. So I'll go ahead and see you in the next video.